A warm welcome back to the Information Security Stack together with me, Daniel Gustafsson and Kim Hindart.
Hubba.
Today, Kim, we're going to talk about EU and the initiatives that is going on currently. Sweden is the guiding star, but Germany is also doing the same thing, and several other European countries are looking at their efforts to see what they can find when they do the mapping of what exists in Europe in terms of suppliers, services that might be or could be an option to the American hyperscalers. In Sweden, just recently, there was a report from the Swedish government agencies who jointly have done a research of potential providers, and they provided a list of options in terms of video services, email services, collaboration services. That was their primary focus initially, but it kind of shows that now at least EU and the EU members are starting to look at other options. So let's have a bit of a discussion what's going on currently. We can start in Sweden and then track our way down in Europe.
Yeah, because if you haven't noticed, we had something of a surge in video conferencing needs. Surprise. Mm-hmm. When the world shut down and everyone needed to stay at home, we needed to do a lot more video conferencing. And this, of course, affected a lot of Swedish agencies as well. And they made a determination that the most popular ones is Teams and Zoom.
Yep.
There's no doubt about that.
Yep.
That's the word. Common ones, and the government agencies made a risk assessment and noticed that it was way too risky to use Teams in the organization because they really didn't think that the users could separate the information they used in Teams in a sensible manner. So they were really concerned that sensitive and classified information might end up in Teams that couldn't be used there. And they saw this as a high risk, so they actually made a big request for information, or actually a big, huge request out to all suppliers. And this was 121 public organizations in Sweden. So government agencies, municipalities, healthcare institutions, they all joined together and made a good review. And this was, of course, focused on video conferencing and team collaboration. And yeah, they made a lot of reviews and researched, and it ended up that there were actually 2 options they found in the entirety of Sweden. And this is just an interesting state of the affairs in Europe.
Yeah. The whole of Europe, they scanned and they found 2 options for a complete delivery, I should say. They had 60 other options in separate services, but 2 providers and 2 services as they found as a complete option to replace an office suite and a video service. 2 in the entire region of Europe. 2.
So, and there's not lack of searching. They did a really good, diligent job on this one. So it's interesting. So I know that other public organizations outside Europe are noticing the same thing, coming to the same conclusion. We can't use the hyperscalers. It's way too risky, especially for public organizations that have demands from that area as well on their data handling and data sovereignty. And then they realize, now what are the options that we can use? And this is very interesting because we all know that software as a service is a growing, ever-growing industry. There's a reason why it's so popular. There's a reason why you want to consume it that way.
Yeah.
Heck, we ourselves have huge issues with finding a customer relationship system.
Oh, goodness.
And HR system.
HRM system, CRM system, recruiting tools, you name it.
Because even if the developers of the service itself are in Europe or European, guess what? The infrastructure use is in Azure, AWS.
Yeah, to the vast majority, yes.
And then they're exposed to FISA and not possible to use in a lot of cases. So this is the huge issue with one, we don't have an infrastructure in Europe. This is what initiatives like IX and stuff is actually working to resolve, but it's very obvious we have pretty much outsourced our entire infrastructure to the US, and that's something we notice now. The same way that when we outsource all our semiconductor manufacturing to China, it bites us in the ass as well when there's a shortage of that. So let's realize you might want to have something within Europe as well, a smidge perhaps, from just continuity perspective. But no, so this was actually, but what they did was they searched high and low everywhere and found that there were actually 2 complete services that they could use. So
that's such a sorry state.
But
that's where we are.
Yeah, exactly. So that's where we are anyway. But this is an interesting observation. And guess what? What will happen next? Yeah, they realized that Teams was not something they could use. But any mail solution from the hyperscalers in their cloud environment, any online solution from the hyperscalers, are exposed to the same thing, because we only have hyperscalers from China and United States. And that's also a sad issue. So yes, the sad part is I don't foresee a European hyperscaler anytime soon.
No, that is not really feasible, I guess, at this particular time.
That's why joint collaborations like the initiative like IX and Cloud Delivery Alliance and stuff can be something that can save us perhaps from a European perspective. But yes, EU really need to focus. But this is also the problem. 95% of the IT budget consumption goes to the United States and China. So EU companies and EU organizations, if you want to have EU services, start buying from European providers.
Yeah, we got that question. It was a couple of years ago when we did a seminar somewhere, and someone said, how can we stop the trend? And the simple answer is stop purchasing the services and stop buying services from other providers and start to look for European options. And the room got silent, because then they realized, well, yeah, that's an obvious fix, I guess, but that's hard, and then that means I need to look around and then do my due diligence and maybe change my behaviors, and it sort of panned out to, well, yeah, but isn't there any other way we can fix the trend? It's like, no, really, we need to start to promote and buy the services from European providers in order to get them to grow. Otherwise, they will shut down and die, or get acquired by an international company and disappear.
Guess what? What happens if we don't buy any European cars? If the entire world only buys Toyota and Ford and nothing else, absolutely nothing else, Toyota and Ford. Toyota and Ford controls 96% of the car market. We wouldn't have that many European car manufacturers.
No.
A whole lot of them would die out, I promise you. We will never have the same amount as we have today. That's just for a fact.
We would have Koenigsegg, but no one can afford their car, so that's a problem.
So there is a big point here.
Yeah.
If we want to have European options, we also have to start consuming European a bit more.
Yeah. And also, I just want to point out, I want to see a world where there are options from US, Asia, and Europe in competition, of course, because if you don't have a good service, you shouldn't be allowed to be a company. I mean, build a good service in order for customers to acquire it and want it. But the whole notion of it's an either or state, I don't like that either. I just want to have that said. It's not that we're saying only European and nothing else. No, I want a healthy market. And the problem right now, we don't have a healthy market.
No, what we all can agree on is we want a healthy competition.
Yes.
And today, Europe gives an unfair advantage to the US hyperscalers in competition to the in-house European. So the in-house European companies that want to deliver has an unfair advantage compared to the US because they give exceptions on standard basic demands to the US hyperscalers. And this is really, really strange. And this is something that Europe as a whole needs to look at a bit more as well. So of course we want competition. But imagine this, let's translate this to a car industry. If Ford is allowed tax exemptions and can sell their cars tax-free, but Mercedes needs to pay full tax on every car they sell, that's a pretty unfair market advantage.
For sure.
They should be able to compete with each other, but under the same rules. And that's the big issue. And as I said, this is exactly why we have EU4 from the baseline, to ensure that you have fair digital markets. And fortunately, EU is working up to this and is starting to work a lot on this. But it's still very important to understand. The European digital market needs to have fair competition from a global perspective. And that means that the global people need to respect the laws in Europe as well. You can't have companies that do illegal stuff, and that gives them a competitive advantage. You know what that's called? Organized crime.
Yeah, exactly. That's mafia, essentially.
Yeah, exactly.
that's illegal. That's not how, according to the laws, that's not the way it's supposed to be handled. Again, same thing. If you have a demand that your supplier needs to have a CBA, a collective bargaining agreement, and that's a dead hard, according to you must have a CBA in order to provide anything to us. And then you make an exemption for providers that are not willing to fulfill it because they have the best service. That's also a situation where, what are we doing here? Why do we have something in place for some providers, but we make exemptions for others? For instance. So it's all of these, again, looking for a fair market. May the best service win. Absolutely. But it should be on the premise that everyone is working after the same rules and regulations.
Because I do hope people can understand that if you give 1% tax on services from the United States, and 25% tax on services from Europe, that's a pretty unfair market advantage as well.
Yeah. So, bunch of things that we're looking into right now. But again, so all these initiatives, then that's what we want to focus on today. There are initiatives now. So Sweden have just completed their report. Germany is on their way with a similar initiative where they are looking for, in their case, they're looking for open options, as they call it. We have an article here which we're going to post in the description later on. But so what they're looking for is to increase the strategic sovereignty of Europe. They want municipalities in Germany to be able to benefit from federal funds and able to adopt solutions developed within the framework of one for all principle, or public code, essentially. And they want to have it based on open standards, so you don't get the lock-ins and so on and so forth. So that's what the Germans are looking at currently. I will link the article in the description later on. But it's interesting to see that these initiatives now are starting to take off within Europe. And I would assume, just from looking at history, that other countries are now looking at Germany And if Germany comes out with a report, I think other countries would follow suit within Europe quite fast. And quite proudly we can say that I think Sweden took charge in this and actually are acting as a guiding star for other European countries to start to take a look at these alternatives and options and what is actually available on the market, and not just blindly wait for a magical unicorn to appear and fix everything for them. I kind of like that approach. So it's interesting to see now if other countries will join in. I think when the Germans are done, more will follow, and then we will have a trend. So they're also referring to the Gaia X project, for instance, which you talked about earlier, which is a joint European or EU-funded project to see if we can start to develop the infrastructure for Europe, at least to have some sort of data sovereignty within Europe. So there are all of these initiatives going on right now currently, which is quite refreshing to see. With that being said, again, I just want to underline and understate, I do not want to see a market with only European providers. This is not about excluding anyone from the European market. I want to see a healthy market, and I want to see a fair market. That's what we're talking about right now, because as we stand right now, it's an unfair market. And also a lazy European market, because we have dug our own grave here, to be honest. So do not blame the Americans, do not blame the Chinese, do not blame anyone else. Europe, this is all our fault. We created the mess we're sitting in right now.
The nice part is we can also correct it.
Yeah, exactly. That's the brilliant thing of this. Whatever mess you create, and whatever pile of junk is on your desk, you are fully capable of removing it and cleaning it up. So that's the good part about it, I guess. So what else is going on in the world?
Yeah,
EDPB maybe?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
The European Data Protection Board finally came out with a good and clarifying definition of what constitutes an international transfer. This is pretty hilarious in a way. Even the EDPB members themselves said this was an oversight when they instituted GDPR. They have an entire chapter of legal requirements that you have to adhere to if you're doing international transfers of personal data. But in the definitions, you haven't defined what is actually an international transfer. And this has been crazy debated. So finally they put the foot down and said this is an international transfer and this is not considered international transfer. And that's a good thing. And what we've tried to scream or shout from the rooftops a bit is, no, it's not just where is the data stored.
No.
Because the ruling thing, and this is also part a bit, I would dare say, of a lobbying campaign from the hyperscalers, that as long as your data is stored within Europe, it's of course not transferred outside Europe.
Yeah.
But this is a thing that they are actually talking about a bit. No, a transfer, and this is nice because they always start to put transfer within quotation marks. And that's great because I can agree that the terminology is crazy confusing when you say transfer. When you say something is transferred in a data sense, of course everyone imagines data being moved from one location to another. No, it's who can access the data being made available. It does not need to be moved. If someone stationed in the United States or stationed in China can access the data stored on servers within Europe, that still constitutes an international transfer.
Yeah.
So that's a good thing that they actually clarified this. It's a matter of who can access your data and from where are they stationed that can actually access the data. And that makes for an international transfer. And they don't need to necessarily move the data in itself or send the data somewhere. It's a matter of can you interact with the data? Yes. And that means that's international transfer and has to adhere to the chapters of the law.
And that's now been clarified in the new statement. And so Again, kind of wish they came up with that clarification in 2016. I'm just saying, but here we are, 2021, and at least now we have a clarification.
But at least now we have the clarification, and that's a good thing. So at least now we have it. But yes, but okay. But if you spend an entire chapter or even 2 chapters on the legality and what you need to do international transfers, it might have been good just to say what is actually international transfer.
Yes.
So that was a bit of an oversight in the definitions, because it has been heavily argued about.
Yes.
Yes,
and rightfully so, because it was very unclear.
Yeah.
What about if I travel? I'm a European, or I work for a European company, and I travel abroad with my computer. What is that then?
No, they actually said that this case is an exemption because you are still considered part of the business entity within Europe. So if you are employed by a European country with a European citizenship and you do remote connection for remote administration to help, if you're on vacation in Thailand, it's not considered an international transfer in the GDPR sense.
No.
But yeah.
Okay, so
but if you hire contract people living in Thailand to do work for you in your system, then that is an international transfer and needs to be considered in that way.
Yeah. So, access to data.
Yes.
And we've been saying this now for a couple of years, and finally we have a statement that backs this, but access to data is the important thing.
And this is important also to know there's no prevention from hiring people that have foreign nationalities. That has never been an issue. They just need to reside within Europe.
Yes.
So the people with access also need to reside within Europe, or they need to adhere to the guidelines in Chapter 5 of GDPR on what is allowed to do if you do a international transfer. And that is, of course, so international transfers are not impossible in any sense. We have a lot of countries where it's perfectly possible. Canada, Japan, Australia. We have a bunch of non-European countries, Switzerland. Perfectly fine. Even United Kingdom got an adequacy decision here.
Yeah.
So, I mean, a lot of them. The reason why this is heavily contested right now is that, of course, all the hyperscalers are in the United States, and the United States have FISA laws that prevent all this.
Yeah.
So this is the big issue. So,
but anyways, we'll link that description as well, or that statement, I should say, in the description, so you can read it for yourself. But finally, now we have some sort of conclusion on what that clarification of that statement, because it has been extremely confusing, and I kind of wish they would have called it data access rather than data transfer.
Exactly.
But that's just me.
But that was an old legacy thing, and believe me, I totally think that all the EDPB members agree on that.
Yeah. So let's take a coffee on that and say that would have been better. But never mind, here we are. So
here we are.
Yeah. So, but I just want to end it on this, Kim, because I have a hunch and a feeling that you and me will have to talk about this in future episodes, even though we have said that we do not want to talk too much about GDPR and data laws, because quite frankly, it's boring, but it's important, I guess. But GDPR now is what? 5 years old? 2016, right? And so 2018 it became law, but 2016 it was initiated. So let's call it 5 years in the making. And we're still talking about GDPR as this big ogre in the room, which you have to try to adhere to, and everything is super confusing. And oh my God, how are we going to survive this? We have some news for you that might not be super enthusiastic, but there are something called EU Cybersecurity Act coming, and other type of regulations coming our way here soon, which will be an even bigger ogre in the room. If we're still stuck in the whole what is GDPR and terminology and definitions in 2021, how super optimistic should we be that the new regulations with the Cybersecurity Act and so on will be fixed in our organizations day one?
Yeah, I'm trying to tell people I meet that GDPR, to quote the director of our data protection agency here in Sweden, GDPR is just a snowball. The coming EU regulations, the avalanche. And we're still looking at the snowball and said that was hard.
That was problematic. Exactly.
And the avalanche is pouring over us.
Yeah.
So GDPR is yesterday's law. Let's agree on that. 2016. Cybersecurity Act was taken into law 2019 and started to be enforced 2021. That's the law of today.
Yeah.
But that's today.
Yeah.
Who here is prepared for the Cybersecurity Act?
Who here has heard about the Cybersecurity Act to begin with? Because I get that. What is that when we talk about it? And we talk to customers.
Okay, just to be clear, if you provide digital services, of course, then cybersecurity is important. GDPR might be important if you are just managing lists and stuff. So GDPR has big parts outside also providing digital services. But let's focus on the digital part of all this and say, if you are a digital service provider of some sense, guess what? GDPR is nothing compared to the Cybersecurity Act you will face. Next, we have a lot of interesting Digital Services Act, Data Governance Act, Digital Markets Act. So we are not done yet. We have resiliency acts, we have response acts. We are nowhere near done. EU is still starting to do it. But this is also people scream, it's bad, it's bad for entrepreneurial things. No, it's not. Because we need to regulate the industry. Self-regulation doesn't work. We have shown this with the tech giants over and over again.
Yeah, and cryptocurrency. I just want to say that.
So self-regulation doesn't work. So no, it needs to be a regulated market. So we need to have common ground rules. Each company can't make up their own rules as they move along.
No.
And this is just a response that there has been no rules at all. You have been able to shoot from the hip. When we have had disagreements, we've had a duel in the morning in the sunshine on the street, and bang, one dies, and then we go. And then you can't continue it that way. No. Sorry to say, no, you can't continue that.
Can't be the Wild West.
No,
and the IT industry has been the Wild West for a long time, and it can't continue to be that way.
High times that you do actually set a common ground rule and common regulations and common baseline for that one. And that's a good thing. But yes, are we prepared? No, we've lived in the Wild West for a long time now. So that's why we have missed it. So, yeah. And
but still, I have a hunch we have to talk about this in the future as well. So we'll do that in more detail as we move on in our series here. But I just want to have that said, that do not get stuck in GDPR. That should have been handled a long time ago, and don't look at GDPR as the big ogre in the room. That's a small friendly giant compared to what is coming. So yeah, again, the industry needs to be regulated. That's all there is to it, and we've been unregulated for way too long, and that has put us essentially in a situation we are in to a large extent as well. So we'll see how that will be received moving forward. And I do agree that entrepreneurship and upstarts and new ideas will not be killed by these regulations. It just will be regulated by these regulations.
You still need to do it legally. That's
yes.
the thing. You're not,
yes.
There's no other industry where we allow it to do, I had this huge idea for making profit. I sell drugs.
Yeah, still illegal. It's called illegal activities, exactly. So yeah, so fair enough. We'll take it as we move along. But anyways, that was a little bit about that. But the takeaways from this episode then is that Europe is slowly but surely starting to move and start to look at what options are out there, and new reports are coming. And the Swedes started it out, and now the Germans here shortly will follow with a similar type of report at least. And we'll see how that goes moving forward. So if you have anything to add to this, if you have any questions, you reach us at citynetwork.eu/podcast. You find us everywhere that podcasts are available, YouTube and all that great things. So yeah, with that being said, I hope you have a great week or weekend, depending on when you're listening to this. and we'll talk to you shortly again. Take care. Bye.